All right. So I have got a creative and management background. And so our discussion for today is AI wrote the code and I wrote the rules. And just to give you a little context about that is I've been a Scrum Master, delivery manager, program manager on various levels, and really been involved in taking a concept that our product management team has done at scale and really getting it to a go-to-market. Let's get it, to where people can use it. Very common. I'm sure a lot of people on this call has got a lot of exposure to that as well. The baseline for this is I don't have an engineering degree. Don't profess that I do, but I've been able to do a lot of interesting things through the past 2 months with this journey. So my problem that I've always been able to get frustrated, come home and really, try to figure out creative ways around it is data. In every organization, whether they're working in Azure, Jira, some Asana format, whatever work management tool, it's just messy, cumbersome data. And in the way that we found risks and found blockers for how we uh, got code to a go-to-market offering was really cumbersome. It's really expensive because we'd have a 15-person meeting, everybody getting paid professional rates, and we would try to figure out a path forward. No one really was able to soft serve in a repeatable way to say, here is where the blocker is. And so everybody experiences that. And the way that our tooling is at scale just doesn't provide a crisp, clean answer without limitless customization on that. So I began to roll up my sleeves and say, well, how can we look at that? So I'm going to give you a teaser where this is going to end up. I built a tool that not only identifies risks, but allows you to drill down into it and be able to give you a custom, I want to execute this thing so that it can unblock X, Y, and Z blockers. And so those were in the form of cards, action items, so on and so forth. We'll take a little bit of a tour on it, but that's the teaser of where we're going to end up. As I began to explore this, unlocking the code really wasn't the issue. It was really how could I manage AI to be able to create an environment that was allowing me to solve a problem. We've heard of hallucinations. We've heard of the way that Claude gets stuck and fixated on something and really sort of gets distracted from the problem we wanted to solve. And so my management skill began to create a framework within this ecosystem to say, okay, how are we always going to be focused on our original design problem? How are we going to automate this at scale? And how are we going to present the infinite amount of variables from all the different enterprise, lenses to provide a consistent path forward? And so through that journey, creativity became the only limiting agent on that. And so, where we look at this as an engineering problem, AI takes that out. And so the 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 delivery workflow shifts from spending a lot of time in execution to really understanding how we're going to frame up this conversation. I've seen Rocket Nine and a lot of their videos talking about this, and really it began to change my mental model on how we were going to go in that format as well. I'm going to stop there, see if it's resonating with everyone, to see if that's a problem that we're all trying to solve. Any feedback before I go a little bit deeper?
I mean, we've talked a little bit, but that's what I keep running into is a lot of the stuff that you're mentioning is, I have these ideas and thoughts, don't have the code background. How do I go about solving and coming up with solutions for problems?
Yeah, I think that it's a multifaceted, you know, discussion, one that we've got a lot of different lenses, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, and we're all trying to find out, all right, what's that medium, what's that middle road where it will resonate with a lot of individuals. Scott?
I was just going to add that especially that last line. I love it because I think for me, uh, one, I don't feel like I'm the most creative person, but I think even the much bigger thing is I keep catching myself thinking, yeah, but that's going to take work to do. I keep forgetting it doesn't necessarily have to take work to do the research, validate something, prototype something, just draft it. But that 20 years of working that way, I still catch it. So unless I'm intentionally trying to say I'm going to use AI for this, all the regular data stuff keeps just going downstream of like, yeah, no, that's going to take time. Pick that up later. It's interesting, but you don't have the time right now. It's not urgent. Instead of like, well, let me just try and see. So that's where I'm wrestling. So I love the creativity, the mindset for me is definitely the limit. I can relate to that.
What's interesting on my journey personally is that I didn't set out on this course. My natural skill set just created this. And I found that interesting because, you know, a lot of people will describe me as very regimented, OCD even. Which is why I like Jira so much. It gave me structure within a massive, way of communicating. Not that we all communicated exactly in Jira, but it was the ability to really understand a story. And so through that structure, my mental lens that I was applying to it, it began to create a framework. I'm saying all this because it's creating context. And that context, and I didn't realize it was going in this direction, was all right, how are you going to write the prompts to be able to multiply this at scale? And so a couple of the big ones I want to highlight with everyone is um, give me three or four options with trade-offs and a recommendation, not an answer presented as the answer. I've noticed that in AI, you ask it a question, it's going to be very direct. And really, you weren't looking for a solution on day one. You wanted to be able to problem solve and critically think situations so that you can make the decision. And that was a real shift for me. The other one was challenge this from six different lenses, whether it's a product, security, compliance, DevOps, engineering, or a data analyst. Once you began to have those different lenses, they began to feel a lot like those meetings in the office where everybody's having messy conversations. You can't do this because dot, dot, dot. And it really began to create that framework so that our checks and balances were in place. We're just not going rogue down the street. The hallucination and the continuous cycling was map every feature back to the one problem. What's that one problem we're trying to solve? Because quite honestly, you feel like you're bunny trailing in the responses that you're giving me. And if you have rules in place to be able to limit that stray, if you will, it helped focus the conversation in the intent. And the last but not least, I'd love to talk to a psychologist in this. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm becoming manic on like, I've got a great idea. I'm really figuring this out. Um, I begin to talk to it like a person. I'm using we. I think we're all doing that in some format. And as that's happening, you're talking to it like Alexa or Gemini, and you're getting that interaction. So as part of that, I wanted to put in a rule to say my observations should not be considered as approvals. There needs to be a gate there to make sure that let me critically think this in a way before I make the decision. That cost me a lot of time before I actually executed that rule in place. And I found it incredibly beneficial as we move forward. And so now that I've gone through those types of mental shifts, there's an old way of thinking versus my new way of thinking. And my new way of thinking is I write laws or frameworks, not generalized instructions that are on a tactical level. Given that, I wrote a 12,500 word document, and I'm calling it my Constitution, right? That frames up everything that I do. Realized, and we've talked about this already, my management career became my technical skill in how I was guiding this problem. The As I began to talk to my peers, I began to realize the limitless amount of variables in how we looked at data. And so I began to engineer trust. I created 3,442 tests, a type gate on every commit, and make sure that it had to say Brian approves for deployment on every single deployment. That was a big one because Claude will definitely take something and say, all right, we're off to the races. And so now I'm realizing, wait a second, I'm actually creating an Autobot engineering department here that I've got to put all these SOPs in place to make sure that nobody's going rogue. And so, given all of that, again, this is just context, my imagination became the bottleneck, not the AI. And so, once we had those laws in place, it really gave us the canvas to say, all right, how far do you want to push this? We'll stop there to see if there's any questions about prompts or how my frame of mind and thinking on this was. All
So
right.
I'm just gonna say, Brad, I love your prompts because I'm finding myself starting to head down that same type of path. You've taken kind of what I'm starting to do and taken it so much bigger than that. So I'm excited to see kind of like how you approach this. Um, because it really is I'm trying to remember how you put it. It's you're the lawmaker, not the one that's having to do all this other stuff. And it's thinking about it from that perspective. The other one I really liked that I'm going to start using is the one where you talk about, hey, look at it from all these different perspectives and poke those holes in it, because that's a big piece that I'm missing. I think could really be helpful on a lot of stuff that I'm starting.
The 6 or 7 different lenses was incredibly helpful because I would go out, create about 150 different agents, do a ton of research, come back and, say, all right, now that we've got all this information, what's useful universally, not just for a biased lens of just UI design. And that really began to focus the conversation in meaningful ways. So highly recommend it. Let's talk about the architecture. So what I've set up is a framework here. This is how it actually looks executed. Anybody that's worked with me professionally knows I love a pretty picture. So it wouldn't be a Brian presentation unless I drew something up here. So the Constitution resides on top. We're always referencing it whenever we open a session. All right, we're looking at, all right, where's Brian's mind at? Created 107 memory files, which is really my personality. I prefer X, Y, and Z. And so it's always referencing those memory files. These are in a stored place that, we can always pull from every time we open up a session. So I don't have to retrain my model every single time. The workflow is me. What do I want to do? And when I started this, I had this true story, a Post-it note right next to my desk, and I used it sort of as a fidget. I was always taking off a Post-it note and so on and so forth, and never writing anything on the Post-it notes. But as the ideas began to really happen, I here's my Post-it notes. I'm gonna probably can't see them here, but halfway through a feature, I'd write 5 more features down and I'd just next, next, next. And so it ended up at times I had 7 or 8 tabs all creating unique greenfield features at the same time. And that created some DevOps issues, which I had to fix. But the ability to just provide input became sort of a bottleneck in the sense of the speed that I wanted to move. I would, come up with those ideas, create a fleet of research agents, go out there and scrape the internet. We'd look at academia, look at professional white papers, the whole nine yards, and really try to understand where that market gap was, where the market success was, and what was the wedge that differentiated between a whole lot of different issues. The DevOps thing, if there's any true engineers on this call, we could tell some funny stories back and forth in the fact that I've heard a lot of key phrases throughout the years, but really didn't know what they meant until now that I'm getting caught on them. I've got to build out a system to make sure that now I know what they meant. Um, there's some hubris here, but I feel like I got a PhD in DevOps within the past 60 days. So, and side note, this probably could have been done in 30 days had I known this on the front end. So once we got our workflow in place and an ounce of humility given to me through that, we would go to live. And before we went to live, we would all run the tests, whether they were unit test, smoke test, production UI test, the whole nine yards before we went to prod. And that guaranteed that there was no regression before we uh, we changed anything. I'll stop there. This oversimplifies a really complex and thorough, space. Any questions about how I framed this up?
Yeah, Brian, a quick question for you. We've been kind of playing around in our company with uh, something that I guess it's called risk tiered PR reviews, um, because we're we're slowly becoming our engineers are just basically becoming PR reviewers now because of the fact that we're able to put so much code, through. And I'm curious if this type of um, gate could assist with that because there are some things that are pretty simple, easy little fixes, easy little bugs that aren't really changing a whole lot. And would this be something that could be used to help, you know, with those lower tier kind of reviews?
I found it as a force multiplier. Um, in fact, I couldn't imagine me not doing that in an enterprise scale, given the ability to execute that. I would really advocate for that type of mindset. I'm working in a zero risk environment where I just want to build a 1.0 something. And so there were times when things went, into my production environment and just didn't work right. Well, my work stream was every time I found that, it became a new law that I would put into either my constitution or memory file. And so it had a, sort of iterative fashion. That was my immediate retro to say, we will never allow that to happen again. And what are all the other variables that we could prevent as a lesson learned from this? And so that was, sort of a win for my, excuse me, my agile background, because that's, an integral part in delivery flow. But to the root of your question is peer review is important. It's necessary. It has to maintain. But every time we learn something in that peer review, we've got to institutionalize it so that it becomes part of our framework. Did that answer your question or?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Um, all right. What did my rule book actually say? And I'm going to skim over this because I think most of everyone here has a seasoned perspective on this. But my leadership, if you looked at all those 107 memory files, the Constitution that I wrote a 13,000 page dossier about, it really boiled down into leadership, how I wanted to frame up things, the DevOps. I've told you the anecdotes about that. Debugging, Sonny, I think part of your question sort of overlapped into that space as well. Data integrity, which was the root problem that I was trying to solve so that I could tell a story. Um, just my personal preferences of I like this versus that. I had some individual design, preferences or biases on that, and then overall design continuity because I would build something and it would look a little bit different every time. And finally, now I realize now I'm a UX UI designer. I've got to create a corporate thematic template that we all reference, and I will never yell at a DevOps or an engineer again when they use the word refactor. I now appreciate it. So that used to be a dirty word in my vocabulary. It is no longer a dirty word. Um, where AI actually earned its keep, um, it helped me through that group of lenses that I built out of what not to build based on academic research or market wedge or some of the other different variables. It helped me understand that, well, I'm going to focus on this since this seems to be a theme that I've latched on here in the last few minutes. The unglamorous 80%. The idea was easy. Executing that idea, understanding the enterprise level security, the redundancy in terms of data backups, the DevOpsness around it, that really helped me execute something at scale. And AI just said, "Hey, why don't you do this?" And every time, going back to that yes and mentality, I'd say, "Absolutely. What else do we need to do?" And so enterprise security began to become a part of that conversation. And then it helped me turn instrumentations into sort of the framework versus, theorizing and then fixing. So I put real rigor in my gating system before we were executing stuff. Um, the most important file wasn't the code that I was having AI build. It was that constitution and putting those frameworks in place. And I'm not going to read this rule line by line, but again, there was 12,500 words in this dossier, and it really became how everything was structured. And it goes back to that. I heard a quote. I don't know if Albert Einstein said it, but I'm going to give it to him anyway. It said that if I had 60 minutes to plan for the end of the world, I would use 59 minutes to actually figure out what I was going to do, 1 minute to execute. I think that resonated in this journey. Um, I can tell you that I believe personally Rome was built in a day. I really do. I think we spent the next 1,000 years fixing those mistakes. And that's based on engineering or construction or home repairs that I've done. Absolutely. And so coming up with this framework helps address some of those mistakes. So here's my journey. Here's where it all came out to. In 54 days, I did 1,618 commits. I wrote 160,000 lines of code. When I say I meant Claude. I created 63 database models, 351 API endpoints, and I didn't write anything. And I think this is the philosophical conversation that I'm having fun at happy hour talking to my peers about. Does this make me a software engineer? Does it not? And I'm sure there's some strong opinions on this call. And anybody watching this video will have some strong opinions. But what we've created, a usable product, there's some conversation that we need to have in the public forum on what that means in terms of the shift. All right. Anybody want to see what I built? Like, quit talking, Brian.
Let's do it.
I've tried to create some context here. So uh, I've enjoyed that journey. I've arguably become a little manic about that journey. There were times where I spent probably 20 hours a day for 2 weeks, just what can I build next? So in that, I realized, well, login pages aren't login pages. They're landing pages that take you to login pages that take you to the actual product. And so back to the original problem I was trying to solve. I just wanted a utility tool that cleansed my data so that I could tell a story about bottlenecks and risks in delivery. That's all I wanted to do. And so through those prompts, the lenses that I applied on this conversation, it helped me go through that journey. And so we created a landing page. We created a very thorough login page. When I say thorough, I thought all you had to do is sign in your name, but it's so much more than that. What if they lose their email? What if you're getting spammed, all that stuff. And that created an ecosystem to be able to parse your data. So on, on the highest level, we're going to look at our knowledge graph. I'll put my this down here. This knowledge graph represents a demoed set of data that is very familiar with all of our organizations. We go into a meeting and we say, what's at risk for the program for next sprint or next quarter? Doesn't matter. Whenever your next deliverable of importance is. So on this demo data, we just want to look at our risks. So in this, we'll say, well, we got some over allocation, we got some scope creeps, right? Here's what's detected. Here's who or what has been impacted from it. And here's where that risk will be impacted at. And so if I just want to look at scope creep, I can isolate that. And I'll isolate that path so we can look at all the variables within that. A typical knowledge graph, anybody that's been in natural language processing or deep learning understands these knowledge graphs pretty thoroughly. This isn't brand new technology. I'm just stealing it for data and pretty low hanging data, but it tells a very powerful story. For the first time now, I can say, all right, I'm looking at a program and I understand, well, all of these have some type of blocker with my Sprint 15. And if I wanted to open that card, I could and take a deeper dive into it. If I wanted to be able to look at it, from a different lens, in that card, it'll show me that knowledge graph for that workflow item. In the interest of brevity, I'm going to skip over some of these features. If I wanted to look at it in terms of, let's see, let's go back to my risk path. Isolate the risk path up. Yeah. Let's look at over allocation. And again, all of these characters are Disney characters. So if anybody's a Disney fan, I'm sure these will resonate. Let's take Han Solo here. He is over allocated. He's been identified as a risk pattern here. Isolate that guy. And we realize he's working on these 3 tickets. Very user friendly. I can be able to drill down, which is a very important thing. I want to be able to drill down and make those changes and say, all right, how is this going to impact it? Let's open this card here and let's make the change. So if we want to add a new resource to this card, we can and begin to make immediate changes into that resource. So that's interesting from a Scrum Master level or a reporting level. I think it doesn't really speak 100% to a leadership level. So I'm going to change gears here from the pretty little picture and say, all right, what's the one thing I need to do today? So based on all that data and how we've built an analytics engine around it that does tens of thousands of calculations a night, it creates priority scores in terms of our risk tolerance. You can see these 80s, 65s on that, and that helps me gauge in terms of if it's a high priority item or a lower priority item. And those priorities are based on date impact, severity, cross team dependency, reach, and that gives us a weighted score. We can modify those because I know each organization will look at it a little bit differently. From there, if I want to protect the date, Here's the one thing that I can do based on those scores. I can send an email to somebody, say, hey, demo 517 has been flagged. I'm going to create a nudge. Ahsoka Tano. Any Star Wars fans on this call? No? All right. See a couple of heads shaking. We can email Ahsoka. Because this is demo, it's not going to go to her directly, but all that's piped up in her plumbing. If we wanted to look at any of the scores based upon this huge data set, it begins to unpack that so that we can tell a story. Additionally, over to the side, I'll go back to our knowledge graph to say it gives a summary of all the different things. Let's say we got 3 over-allocated people. Buzz Lightyear, Bob, and Anakin Skywalker. We can begin to drill down into that data set as well. And if we wanted to make that immediate move, we can begin to change based on whoever we wanted to change that to. We can also filter that if we just wanted to look at our engineering department. You can see that these are dynamic links. So now we've gone from an at risk to it's likely to finish on time. I'm going to pause there. There's a lot of technology in this. Any questions in terms of how I've structured this or the story that we're trying to tell?
I was just gonna make one comment from what I've seen a lot, Brian. And then I've been in these meetings where, hey, these are all the issues that we're seeing, which might take half the week to diagnose and research and collect, and then bring the team together and say, here's the issues. And a lot of times, especially for cross team, it's like, okay, well, let me go and talk to so and so and so and so, see what we can do, or let me get back, let me get back to you. And that those delays when you're really concerned about time and having any kind of a decent roll up report. I just love the idea of like having all the right people in the room and saying, look, let me help you teams because they don't necessarily love this. I'm just surfacing only the concerns that are top concerns, and we can action right here, right? So if you two just agree that yeah, you can swap those tasks, done, right? And they would love that they're not having to go back, log in the Jira, do all that kind of stuff. And I think serving the team, but also serving leadership, much more efficient, much more effective, done in a working session with the team. And they just get on that heartbeat of knowing that we'll surface issues, we'll recommend solutions. If you guys are on board with that, great, done. I mean, I just love the way that would feel and look compared to what I had to do in the past more manually and quite a bit of a grind too.
I found it as a tool that creates alignment rather than finger pointing. And so the alignment helps in expectations that I don't think anybody comes to work and says, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. But there's a lot of things that fall through the cracks. And this will help in terms of that organizational alignment to make sure that everybody's pointed in the right direction. So the brief is a pretty powerful tool that summarizes our main risks based on that criteria, which is a weighted scale. It's pulled from an analytics engine. And then we take a little bit of AI on top of it to say, all right, give us the one recommended move based on all this information. All right. If because I had just additional time, I said, all right, well, let's put a AI in here. Uh, what is whoa, Han Solo working on? We've got our basic, please work. There we go. Oh, demo fail. Look at that. That was supposed to pull something up.
He
So
might have just been let go.
he's been over allocated and he's still working on tickets. So not sure what happened there, but that worked 15 minutes before this conversation started. So guess what? We get to create a new rule in our Constitution now based on this. Coming full circle. Going back, just showing some other things. We've got graphs till your heart's content. We can look at capacity. We can filter that capacity based on just one person. Let's see. Let's clear a section here. Let's just look at Ahsoka Tano. Add a couple of people in here. It's all dynamic. We can go from hours to points because I know that's a religious conversation in some organizations. I'm not going to touch that on this call, but you've got flexibility on there. You can begin to scope out work based upon whether you're ready to commit to it as a department or you're ready to commit to it based on an organization or on an individual contributor level. So if by department, I wanted to say that we had 40 hours of planning on X, Y, and Z, we're going to commit to that. Or if I wanted to go to Anakin Skywalker and say, what are you committing to this versus what you've actually logged? Lots of math in here. I never remember all the math. That's why I've got a whole bunch of reference guides in here to help remind me in terms of if someone wants to have an academic conversation that, well, that's not right because dot, dot, dot. I wanted to just sort of spoon feed that and make it customizable moving forward. Um, not last but not least, there is, let's see, hold on, let me go into a different area here. Please hold. Oh, there's my privacy letter in here because I've never signed into this environment before. So we've got compliance. My compliance lens made me sign a privacy letter. We can create a persona based upon your login address. Are you a project manager or scrum master, or do you need this information presented in a particular leadership lens? I am going to go to, let's see, reports now. Reports, we've got delivery velocity, which is a dynamic conversation. Just want to look at my developers. Let's see, Scrum Masters. Nope, let's go with something else. There we go. All right. Begin to add more teams on there, get more pretty lines. Oh, I'm moving there. There we go. It's all dynamic. It's a lot of fun. All the different charts that will, that most of your Scrum Masters or individual contributors spend a lot of time pulling together. I'm going to pause there. Any questions just in terms of what we pulled together collectively? All right. Two last things in an Easter egg. Nothing will be complete without a Kanban board. We've got the ability to, and here's where it gets fun, connect to source. If you wanted to connect to source via your Jira, Azure DevOps, Asana, we're going to add a whole bunch of other workforce management tools in here. Or if you've just got a spreadsheet, you want to sort of munge your data and take a look at it, you've got the opportunity to do that. Additionally, if you wanted to create or if you had transcripts of a meeting and you wanted to import those meeting notes to create Jira tickets, you can do that as well. It's a whole functionality to make sure that, if there were action items coming from that discussion, you can parse that out and begin to immediately assign tasks to those action items. Any questions on the import export relationship? All right. Last but not least, I call this Jarvis. Let's see. Hold on. Is it going to work? Oh, no. Come on. You got to be kidding me. That was how I was going to end everything. I've got let's see, go to my super user here. Here's my tour, because for new users, Jarvis. All right, something's happened there. I've got a dashboard that I've showed all my friends, but evidently we've got demo drama here as well that I can speak to that gives me my organizational layout in terms of users, costs that are being pulled based upon my Claude accounts, how many tickets have been imported, et cetera, et cetera. Put a Jarvis voice on there. I was really excited to showcase that, and that went with a thud. So.
you earn another demo stripe. I might.
I appreciate everybody going on that journey with me. It's been fun. I've definitely learned a lot based on all the different trials and tribulations. I've only been doing it for about 2 months, and like I said, I got so excited about it, originally. I realized my career had shifted immediately.
Mhm.
I was in a role where there was a lot of change, and I decided, you know what, this role is not going to fit my where my head's at right now. So I decided to take a pause on that role and immediately just go gung ho into, sort of this technology, this space. I think it's intoxicating. I love to talk about it. I'm trying to get my peers as excited as I am. Some of them are coming along reluctantly. Some have quit answering my calls. So appreciate you let me have the time to talk about it with this group.